and welcome to ECCB Connects. As we continue to mark Financial Information Month, we look at some of the products and services the commercial banks offer to you. I have with me General Manager and Country Head of Scotiabank St. Kitts, and he's also President of the St. Kitts and Nevis Bankers Association and Treasurer of the ECCU Bankers Association, Mr. Dave Ramsumair. Dave, welcome to ECCB Connects.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me.
Dave, commercial banks have been with us for a long time. Over the years, the products and the services have changed, but the banks have always been with us. Why do we need commercial banks?
Commercial banks have been at the core of country development, or the development of all countries in the region for as long as we can remember, well over, but probably a couple hundred years. Commercial banks play a very, very important role in not just the development of countries, the financial sector, as we like to say, but it also plays a very important role in the community development in the regions in which each banks operate. To take my point a bit further, to go into a little bit greater detail, banks in general, commercial banks, we facilitate trade, where companies wanting to do business abroad use commercial banks to facilitate that type of payments, to facilitate settlements of goods coming into the country. So that's on the commercial scale. Banks help clients, businesses to acquire loans for development of their businesses, to help their businesses grow, to acquire assets that are needed to enhance their business operation. And this all happens daily and happens seamlessly. On the personal level, banks help clients acquire homes, through mortgages. They give loans to buy cars, to help people get credit cards, for instance, to do online shopping these days. That's so very important. Without banking services, it would be very difficult for some of these things to happen. And most importantly, where it all started, banks are a place where customers secure their savings. It secures the funds they need, not just for their day-to-day livelihood and living, but for their long-term, for their future, for their retirement down the road. They use the bank as a place, as an avenue to store their wealth and accumulate their wealth for later years. So it's a service that we provide all around, full package service that aids the development of both the individual consumer, the general public, and businesses.
Opening an account. Nowadays, customers complain that the opening an account seems to be so cumbersome. It's a lot of paperwork. Why is this necessary?
That's a relevant complaint that customers make, in the sense that that's how they feel. I assure it's not because the banks feel that they want to make people's lives difficult. There is really a reason behind it. And especially over the last few years, maybe the last 10 years or so, it has changed where more information is being requested and asked of clients as they come to banks to do business. It goes back to the tragic events of September 11. In 2001, September 11th, when you had the planes flying into the Twin Towers, that really changed the face of banking and the compliance and the way we do business around banking and in the banking sector. Now, because of that and what was learned from those tragic events, banks now have to ensure that when we open accounts, we are satisfied the people opening accounts are who they say they are. They live where they say they live, that they work where they say they work, they earn what they say they're earning, because what used to happen before, you would open accounts and not really pay a lot of attention. Well, following September 11, it was realized that if we had paid greater attention to some of these details, the sector might have aided in uncovering acts of terrorism financing, It might have uncovered money laundering. So those things have now become part of our lives. Banks are required to make sure we verify source of funds, and we know in great detail who we're dealing with. And that in turn has prompted us to ask more questions, ask for more information. So it does seem a lot, but trust me, it is warranted, and the banks are simply following the law.
In that same vein, we've been hearing recently about the issue of banks in the region losing correspondent banking relations with their banks overseas, as well as the issue of de-risking. How are the banks responding to these issues?
Very important topic and point. And yes, that is true. Throughout the Caribbean region here especially, many banks have received letters from their correspondent banks in, let's say, places like the United States, saying that they're going to stop doing business with them. It's a very serious matter and issue, because when a bank loses its correspondent banking arrangement in a foreign territory, it makes it that much more difficult for the banks to do business, whether it's in terms of clearing checks or receiving wire payments coming in from abroad. So it affects each and every one of us here in the Federation and throughout the region. The reason for that is that banks over the last little while they've had to pay very heavy fines for actions because they failed to follow certain guidelines with respect to their operation. That's one. So because of that, they allowed things like terrorism financing. They allowed money laundering to get through, where drug cartels and whatnot were able to launder money through the banking system. Hence the reason we ask all those questions and ask for all those forms and all of that now.
When you're opening an account.
Exactly. Coming back to the earlier point that we discussed. So if you played forward here to us, the banks here locally, for us to maintain our the relationship, the correspondent banking relationship, and not be de-risked by those banks, we have to pay greater attention and detail to the way we accept transactions and we do business, right? The banks in the region, with the help of the ECCB, with the help of the CARICOM government body, with the help of this Caribbean Development Bank and the IMF, have been trying to get that trend reversed and speak with the correspondent banks away to have them either restore or to desist from de-risking the banks in the region. It's an ongoing project. Prime Minister Gaston Brown, from Antigua, currently heads up one of the committees, aided by Prime Minister Barrow from Belize. So they're working on that. What we do here on the ground, though, we have to make sure that the day-to-day transactions that we handle are handled in a reputable manner, a professional manner, that we do our proper due diligence. So we ask the public to please understand this and support us. Taking it a bit further, if you fail to do that, then you run the risk of your bank actually closing your account. So it could come down to the individual level. If you don't follow or comply or aid us in getting the information we need, it makes it difficult for us to continue to do business with you, and could lead to termination of your banking relationship with the organization. People
don't want that, because we've already said banks are very important.
Yes, and it's not a nice feeling, I would imagine, if a bank comes and says, we're closing your account, and you've dealt with the bank for many, many years. And sometimes I'll tell you it's because people just feel that you're invading their privacy, or why should I provide that information? Again, we would not ask it if we didn't need it. And we don't write the laws, but we have to follow them. If not, the operation of our bank would be in jeopardy.
So what customers see as cumbersome is really for individual and national protection?
Yes, it is. It is for individual and national protection. And it is a case where the banks must. There really is no option available to us. So let me give you an example. For instance, there are several laws that deal with Proceeds of Money Laundering Act, deals with terrorism financing, that if we don't follow those laws, not just here in the Federation, but where we might be doing business elsewhere, we could be held liable and accountable for not observing those laws.
You can lose your license?
Yes, you could actually, it could go as extreme, you could lose your license, and me as myself, as head of the bank here in St. Kitts and Nevis, could be called before various committees and be held personally liable.
So it's a serious matter.
It's a very serious matter.
One of the hot issues now, bank fees and charges. Over the past 5 or so years, we've seen an increase in existing fees and introduction of new fees and charges. What is driving this?
Okay. Fees, I know it's a sore topic, and more so recently than in years gone by. And the reason behind it is that each bank, I'll start off by saying each bank has a different fee structure. Very rare will you find another bank having the exact same fee structure. And I say that because what it means is that banks have a different cost structure. So first and foremost, banks tailor their fees to suit the services they provide and the costs that they incur in providing those services, right? Fees are therefore, it's not there's no cartel operation, there's no collusion on the part of banks to arrive and say, well, we're going to charge this amount for this service, etc. It's an individual choice that each bank makes. Banking is a business. The banks charge fees to aid in their profitability. If they don't do that, then it puts additional pressure on them having to charge higher rates of interest, for instance, on loans, right? Especially in an environment where the margins, the money that you make on loans right now, have come down significantly because the interest rate and what the investments we can make have shrunk. Okay, so the cost is going up, the cost of doing business is going up, the margins on loans have come down, so banks have to turn to fees to price it properly to help offset some of the losses or the reduction in spreads that they would make on interest rates. So as a result, is impacted fees, and I know the public, of course, sees it as gouging in some cases. I've heard those terms being used before. It's rest assured, nobody wants to gouge anybody. We charge what we believe is reasonable. I must add that if the public takes the time, go in and talk to your banker, you will very often find that there's a means of doing your banking, in some cases at no cost. So for instance, online banking with most banks is provided very cheaply or in some cases no cost. ATM banking, if you do your banking and you take your cash out, very often there's very little or no cost to you, depending on the bank you're with. If you use your ATM to pay at businesses, the cost is very low. So you don't need to stand in line and line up and queue up to take money out. There's ways that we can help you do your banking, pay your bills online, and those come at a much reduced cost. I say all of that to say that when it comes to charges, talk to your banker, go in and see them, and find out what is the cheapest and most applicable way for you to do your banking.
So there are ways to escape these fees?
Absolutely, there is.
Dave, thank you very much, and we're going to pick up on these issues in our next program.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
You're watching ECCB Connects, protecting our currency, developing our region. And now for this week's financial tip.
Have a financial goal.
If you don't know where you are going financially, you may end up somewhere you don't want to be.
To view any episode of ECCB Connects, anytime, any place, at your convenience, check out our YouTube channel, ECCB Connects.
That's it for this week's episode of ECCB Connects. We'll continue this interesting discussion in our next program, where we look at the loan process and debit and credit cards.